Okay. Y'all want to come around a little?
No.
Okay, you'll just listen from over, okay. Thank y'all so much for coming. This is the perfect size crowd because, well, we all know why. This is just perfect. Thank you very much for coming on Friday afternoon. My name's Laura Raborn, and I have notes. It's kind of a little crutch, but it's really to do us all a favor so that I don't go on tangents and start telling random stories unrelated to the group of work. So this will help me keep the lecture to under 10 minutes. So first I'll talk a little bit about why I paint the figure in art, and then talk about the strong influence of museums in my work for the last several years. And then I'll talk more about how I developed this group of work. So a tiny bit of background: I've painted and drawn and done pottery and all kinds of art my whole life. And over 10 years ago, I went back to grad school at UA Little Rock because I knew that everything I was doing could be better, and I just needed really constructive criticism and really be in an environment where I could progress in a way that I just didn't find I could do at home on my own. And going back to school at age 40 was so much better, because had I done that when I was like 20 or 22 or 24, I would have been in tears after those critiques. I was just more sensitive then. And so when I went back as a 40-year-old who had 2 small daughters at home, I was like, oh, bring it on. Don't waste my time. Tell me what you think. Like, it didn't hurt my feelings at all. And that really allowed me to really develop my work, learn more, and make progress quickly. So I loved my experience at UA Little Rock, and really love to talk about that for the benefit of other people interested in it, and for the art program there. Right after I graduated in 2014, I was accepted to a 1-week residency in Italy. And that was amazing. I traveled by myself for 2 weeks and then was in the program for 1 week. And I was alone, with the exception of the 1 week of the residency. I was alone the whole time. And what that caused me to do is be super observant, because I don't speak Italian, so I really couldn't interact with people. Occasionally I would meet an English speaker, or I'd speak a little Spanish. I might meet somebody Spanish, but for the most part, I really didn't have anybody to talk to. So I found myself, I was blogging a lot, like as a way of talking to someone, which was kind of weird. And then I found myself really people watching. And people watching in Italy, I have skipped several sections of my letter sheet. I didn't look at the page the whole time, y'all.
That's a good story then.
Okay, I will get back to that. I'm going to leave you on a cliffhanger, if that was even interesting to begin with. So I'm going to go back a little bit to the figure in art, and then we'll get to the Italy work and the museum work. But the figure in art I focus on, and whenever I try to do artwork that lacks the figure, I feel like it's kind of unfinished. And I'm like, oh, but it's missing something. And I've had some people look at my abstractions and say, you should just stop there and, try to sell that. And I'm like, but it's missing something. And of course it's the figure. And I've thought hard about that, and why I care so much about representing the human in a 2-dimensional painting. And that is because it gives us something to relate to. And I think that we're all trying to learn more as we go through life, learn more about each other, learn more about ourselves. And art is a way of communicating. It's like film or literature or music or dance. It's just another way of communicating and learning. And the best thing to me about it is that it can offer lessons about people's experiences that are different from our own. And it can do it in a pretty powerful way. And so when the figure is in the art, we can really identify with it and learn from it, to me, in a more engaged way. And so people in museums is important to me, because I really started to love watching people to kind of take in art. And I think that museums are really important for society and for cultures, because they offer something to us. Like, artists typically don't have a powerful position economically, or a powerful position in politics. They're drawing and painting their life's experiences. So when you go into a museum and you see artwork, I think for the most part, some of it's super political or super social justice oriented, but so much art just reflects somebody's life experience. So it's not propaganda trying to sell you an idea or trying to convince you of something. It's just mostly art that says, this is how I see things, or this is the experience I've had. So we can go in knowing that nobody's trying to manipulate us. So I find museums really important for that. So this is getting back to the Italy thing. With all that in mind, like loving the figure, and then really developing a deeper appreciation for the existence of museums, which is just kind of weird that we build these huge structures and put millions of dollars in them to house art. I mean, to me, humans have to be compelled to appreciate that or like it or benefit from it, or we wouldn't spend all that money. So just thinking about that stuff has really, that's always been on the back of my mind. So back to the Italy story. So when I was there and I was on my own, I found myself just constantly people watching. And I took a lot of pictures and did a lot of sketches of people. That was the primary goal, was to get lots of figures in action. But because artwork is everywhere there, like in churches and on the fronts of buildings and on the tops of buildings and in little fountains and of course in museums too, on bridges, on the entrance of bridges, then when you're watching people, really everywhere you look, you're watching people watch art. And so when I got home, I noticed that all this material I brought home was not just of Italy or not just of people, but of people watching art. So I started to really pay more attention to that when I was traveling anywhere. It could be to downtown to the Arkansas Art Center. I'm sorry, what's the new name?
Arkansas Museum of Fine Art.
Thank you, Clark. I knew somebody here would really nail it.
Museum of Fine Art.
So whether it's just traveling down the road to the Museum of Fine Art, or to Bentonville, to Crystal Bridges, or to New York to a museum, I just found myself fascinated with really people watching still in those environments. But I still just didn't think I was developing a body of work or going to do anything with it. It was just an interest. Except that when I went through all of my materials, I was like, okay, I have tons, like hundreds of sketches and hundreds of photos of this one subject. It might be time to turn them into paintings. So once I finally understood that, I started to develop like sketches that were a little bit further along, and did about 6 or 7 paintings. They showed here and at Justice Fine Art, and they all sold. And I was like, oh, maybe I'm not the only one. That's kind of a good sign. I was like, maybe I'm not the only one interested in this. And so I decided to really start more and do a larger group. And around that time, COVID hit. And so, I did some of them, but kind of in the middle, COVID hit. And that was really interesting because it started to make me long for those times of being in crowds and being in museums and traveling like that. So as I sketched and painted these, I was missing them, kind of longing for it. It's like missing these scenes even more. So even though the group is like cohesive in its theme, there is a variety, like people outside in front of a fountain, people indoors in museums, massive sculpture, 3D, 2D. This is at Crystal Bridges on the garden, one of the garden walks. Yeah. They're really from all over, and they even include a couple just fiction ones. So some of y'all probably heard me say this. This was this pomegranate on my dining room table from Trader Joe's, and the light kept hitting it, and it was so beautiful. And I was like, oh, I want to do a painting of that. And then I thought, no, I'm trying to focus on the museum group. And then one day I woke up, I was like, I could put the pomegranate and pretend it's in a museum and pretend somebody's watching it. So that one is just pure fiction. And then kind of going down the rabbit hole like a Charlie Kaufman film, like The Orchid Thief and Synecdoche, New York, and Clark, what's the name of the Sunshine?
Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
Thank you, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. He is a director who does all these themes of like looking at reality and then mimicking reality, and we think it's reality, and all this kind of weird, it gets a little bit mind-boggling. But so here's a woman, she was in a museum in Paris, but so I used her figure from a sketch I had, but then I'm pretending she's in a museum looking at a painting of this woman looking at a painting of the pomegranate. So you could just go to like infinity. So if you catch me taking a picture from behind you of looking at some of these paintings, you know, you might be in a new one with your permission. But anyway, so that's kind of like sneaking a little joke in some of the work. But I like to think, one thing that I think is fun to consider is just that, like that if you come to the wall and look at the paintings, you're duplicating the action of the people in the paintings. And just why that is, why you're even interested. And I think that that's really a fun thing to think about, but it also can help us feel connected. Like you can be just different from the people in these paintings, but still have that connection. So I do hope that you're able to find your favorites, or at least one that you can connect with. There are more shown on my website. So this is a portion of the group. So if you want to visit that, it's laurarabornart.com. And you're welcome to send me questions about any of them. And let's see, that about wraps it up. If anybody has any questions, I love it. I love it when somebody asks me a question and gets a talk going, so yeah.
The top one, it makes me think I'm in Paris, outside the Louvre.
Oh, because of the pyramid?
Uh-huh.
Oh, that's fun. No, I hadn't.
And I thought, okay, these are students, and they're outside, and they're wondering, why is this thing in the middle of this old-fashioned museum?
So you've created a whole other narrative for it, because this was at the, I used to pronounce this gallery name wrong, and I think I have it right, Gagsonian in New York, and it's a huge museum, and those three young women were in there, and they were all dressed in gray. They did not have on red, yellow, or blue scarves, but I added those as the primary colors in that pyramid. And so that pyramid is something that was on the wall in that museum, and it was reflecting, and the floor was waxed and so shiny, so it was reflecting onto the floor, and it was winter time, you know, they look all bundled.
Mm-hmm.
But I love that you thought of the pyramid
I did.
in front of the Louvre.
Uh-huh. That's all I could think of. And I
Thanks
think
for asking that question too, because I wouldn't have picked up on the
What?
scarves.
On the scarves?
Yeah.
Yeah, the scarf.
You mentioned earlier something about the
Yeah.
scarves, and I almost said to you that it's to tie the women to the pyramid, to like kind of make a little connection there.
Very cool.
Laura,
Yeah.
that one, we think she's either Amish or Mennonite, but you said that was at Crystal Bridges, but where is that at Crystal Bridges?
So you know how the architecture at Crystal Bridges is so cool in the way that it has these nooks? So you'll be walking down a hall, and then there's a nook with a big window that gives you a really good view of something
Yes.
outside. Well, that is, I don't know how to describe exactly which nook it is, but that is in a nook with a window, so she's indoors.
Yes.
And there's actually a window,
I
a glass
see.
between,
I'm looking at it.
Mhm.
between her, like say this is a concrete floor, so the glass wall probably goes up from there.
Okay,
So, but the glass was so clear, there were no reflections or anything, so you really can't
right.
see that there's glass there. And she was reading a brochure about the exhibit that was the installation that was outside the garden.
Okay.
And she had a little baby in a stroller with her, and I drew it, and it looked,
You didn't like it with it?
no, it looked awkward, and it made all the focus go to the baby, and I wanted the focus to
I
be
like
really
that.
like on her booklet and head, and then the glass
I like
outside.
that.
Yeah,
I
so
like
it's
that.
kind of fun to change them too, like some of them are exact copies of what I saw, and then some of them I just start to change them,
Change.
yeah, and kind of play
really
with
cool.
pointing. And this couple posed for me. Sometimes I don't, like these people are walking and they're in a dark spot. I didn't chase them down to ask them if I could take their picture. But these people, I started to feel like they might sense that I was following them around, and that was getting creepy, so I finally was like, I make paintings and drawings of people looking at art, do you mind if I take the back? And they were like, oh, we'll pose, like, okay. Yeah, so they were very cooperative, but yeah, so different scenes. And if I ever do a painting where you really can see somebody's face, I will ask permission before I take their photo and do their sketch. A lot of these, the point is not to capture a likeness, it's just to have a human form there. So I don't feel really risky on somebody seeing a painting and being like, oh, that's me, and she
Right.
didn't ask my permission, but still, I think it's nice if you can really see their face to, and I've had a couple people say no. And I'm always like, oh, but your hair is fabulous, like, sure? You know, there's always some reason I really wanna
Right.
paint them, and that's always a little disappointing, but, yeah. Does anybody have any other
I
questions?
wanna know about the family.
The family in front of Lincoln, you know, I was there, we have a daughter who goes to college in Washington, and so we've been really lucky to be able to go a handful of times in the last few years. And even during COVID, we went, and, we just drove up there, it was October, and everything was closed. I mean, everything, all the museums and everything, it was very quiet. And, so we really did not see a lot of people, we didn't get close to people, we weren't indoors any places. All the restaurants were shut down and everything. So we did stuff outside, of course, like the walk with all the monuments. And there were just still these families out there so proud, you know, and like just, they respected that statue so much, and you could see the joy in their faces, and you just know they have a story, and just capturing like how important this massive sculpture how it can have a lot of meaning for a person and kind of define their beliefs. And I don't know, I found that to be, that's one of the greatest things about that whole area, that whole mall walk. Like the Martin Luther King sculptures just takes your breath away, and all of them, all the war memorials and everything are just beautiful. And then there's the Roosevelt area that has all these quotes, and it really makes you think, like they're pretty timeless and appropriate for today, and you know, it's just really fascinating. So that's why I decided to do one of the family.
Where is this one?
That one's in
Yes.
Philadelphia.
In Philadelphia.
Yeah, these kids sitting in front of a fountain, and the light was just so beautiful. It just kind of made me think, not so much of them interacting with the art, but just the idea of public art and just being with it in a public space. And the light coming through the water was nice.
That's neat.
And they were all looking down at their phones.
I was gonna say, they're all
Yeah.
looking
That's
at their
okay,
phone.
you didn't have to ask me.
Yeah,
But they wanna be
Pretty much.
in that space.
they chose
They
to sit
chose
there.
to
Yeah,
be
that's
there.
what I thought. They chose to sit right there. And the paintings, I tried to include a variety of people. So there are all kinds of people in the museum spaces, like all ages, all colors, like, you know, every gender, every hair color, people who may be missing body parts or whatever. I mean, just a wide variety of people to really kind of emphasize that art does not communicate, it's not just for one group of people, it really can uplift us all.
You do beautiful work.
Thank you, Delaney. Thank y'all so much for coming, I
Yeah.
really
It's
appreciate
really
it.
meaningful.
And
I mean,
so
really meaningful.
I'm so glad, cause of course I'm biased and it means
Oh,
something to
really?
me, but for you to think it's meaningful is
Oh, it is.
a real treat to hear. Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank y'all, and thanks Campbell Gallery.
Good job.
Thank you Campbell Gallery for